Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Mad Mamluks. My name is Sim. Along with me are my co-hosts, Mort and Maheen. What's going on?
I don't see nothing yet.
Yeah, it didn't.
Yeah.
It's
No, I
not.
think we're good. We're fine.
Sure?
We're good.
We're
Yep,
fine.
yeah, we're good now.
Okay.
It's about to kick off.
Thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. We're excited for this show, but before we get started, make sure you click on a like and subscribe on the show. Every like helps, and without your likes, our channel doesn't get the exposure that it deserves. So if you can't help us out on patreon.com/, please help us out with a like. Our guest today, a person who can only be described as someone who counters the Black narrative that is happening in much of the world and in media. You may have seen him on Joe Rogan's Experience, the Joe Rogan Experience, and he is just pretty much the face of the Hotep movement. Please welcome Hotep Jesus.
What's up, fellas? Thank you for having me. Appreciate you.
How you doing, man?
Tired.
Tired?
Yeah, sleepy, tired. I'm working on my book. Just mentally drained, but let's get into this.
What are you writing on?
U.S. history.
Okay, but from more of the Hotep point of view.
No, just exposing some things that need to be exposed.
I got you.
I've been familiar with some of the people in the movements. I've seen you did an interview with Shaka Moose, and I know I sometimes follow his stuff and just because I like the debate stuff. You know, I've seen some of the what do they call them there? The Black Hebrew Israelites. I've seen them, and I've seen the Kemet people, and I've seen them around. So I just like to hear the arguments, and I think that guy is a very interesting. He has an interesting take on American history and just history in general. Like there's a lot of things that people don't realize. I think a lot of people dismiss him because they're like, oh, maybe the way he looks or the way he comes off, or sometimes they come off and in the street preachers, they come off too aggressive. Sometimes some people, but when you sit down and watch like some of his stuff on his own channel, it's unique. I mean, I think I enjoy watching the interview, to be honest. I mean, so talk about that for a minute. Why? How did you like? What is Hotep? And because most of our audience is probably like Asian, Arab, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, Muslim population, and they're not really familiar with what Hotep is. So why don't you just take a minute? I mean, I know it's not a person. People think it's a person or not, but it's a movement, right? So let's take a minute to talk about that.
Yeah. I guess you can say that there was a bifurcation of the Black community. Some go left, some go right, some go liberal, some go conservative, some go socialist, some go capitalist. We can loosely be described as right-leaning, or the right-hand side of that spectrum, more conservative capitalist side of that spectrum, which is diametrically opposed to what the socialist has brainwashed our people with through Wall Street money. But the term Hotep actually comes from ancient Meta Neter language. Hieroglyphics is the written version of that language. We use the term as a greeting or exit, like you would say peace. You know, what's up, homie? Peace. That's how we use it in the so-called conscious community. So it turned into pejorative. The Black liberals, Black socialists, Black feminists have turned the term Hotep into a noun and a pejorative. And I was labeled that for a while, and then I basically took it on as a moniker. And so here we are. You know, it didn't sit well with me that so many people took a word that we thought was sacred. I mean, to be at rest, to be at peace, to have satisfaction, tomb, many different definitions of this term Hotep. And they were just dragging it through the mud. And it's just like, for people to say that they care so much about Black history, to take something that is part of our culture and drag it through the mud is just it's atrocious. It's atrocious. It's embarrassing.
They're basically like reclaiming the narrative, right? You got to own the word, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's smart way to do it. Me and Mort have been talking about this whole like we're labeled as this thing called the Ak right, right?
So Aki means
brother, right? It's like because we're kind of like this. We're not. It's an unfair term, but then sometimes we think we're talking offline. We're like, hey man, what if we just owned it? Like we just like, yeah, we are the Ak right. Like rather than because all this is about frame, and the left has this way of like framing discourse in a certain way, and sometimes we just let them.
Right. And they want to categorize. And one of the things that drew me to you, Hotep, was that we as as Muslims in this country, we're experiencing similar narratives, similar experiences in where Muslims are expected to behave something in a certain way, hold a certain set of values, latch on to other ideas and other associations with political groups or other intersections within society based on some arbitrary set of values that mainly center around oppression, that we are an oppressed class, we are someone who is experiencing some level of Islamophobia or racism and something, and we need to rally around this and form alliances and factions and some sort of collective that is combating whatever is happening in the world. And I think that's why when Nabil, one of our common friends, introduced me to you and Uncle Hotep on Twitter years ago, this was something that I was like, oh, well, this is what I'm seeing from the average black man I talk to. I'm not seeing some of the stuff that I'm seeing in social media where, everyone is just doing oppression Olympics, and I'm seeing a different type of black individual. So tell us a little bit about that, like how you're reshaping or reclaiming what it means to be black.
I'm not at all. I'm fucking minding my business and going my own way. Everybody who's black knows what it means to be black. It's the people who are raised in the suburbs and go to an HBCU to find their blackness, or it's usually the types that never been around black people that try to redefine blackness. Blackness has already been defined. It doesn't need to be redefined. The socialist is the one that's trying to redefine it, but everybody that's black knows what black means and what the culture stands for and what it doesn't stand for. But we're being infiltrated by socialist propaganda and mental conditioning.
Yeah, I think there's some parallels with that because, so I don't know how familiar you are with the Muslim community, but for us, like post 9/11, it was a whole different kind of world for us, right? I mean, growing up in America, and then you see this whole different reality post 9/11, scrutinizing you, paying attention to you. And then, see, here's the funny thing. I don't know if you know this, but prior to like 2003, many of the Muslims were probably conservative. You call them maybe Republican, but just generally conservative.
I would say immigrant Muslims.
Even regular Muslims over here.
African Americans, not. They were never Republican.
No. But I'm saying, yeah, okay, yeah. But
you said what? African Americans were never Republican?
Our African American Muslims in general were more Democrat.
Well, I mean, Malcolm X was against the Democrats. I mean, he used to call them liberals.
But back then, we're talking about in the 70s and 80s, in the 90s even, a lot of the African American community, they were still like more Democrat. They weren't Republican for sure.
Okay. Yeah, but so at least our community that we come into, like the Arab, Indo-Pac, or whatever you have, like that frame was more conservative because we look at conservative values. You say, look, you know what? Whether it be like about dating or whatever it be, like just God, religion, guns, whatever you want to call it, it's just generally more conservative, right? Homosexuality, transgenderism, all that stuff wasn't part of our framework. Like it's not within our MO to be like
trans wasn't even a thing in America 20 years ago. That's just crazy,
But the left was pushing things like this early on.
Sure. You had trans. It wasn't a big talking point, but you had trans.
Right.
So the thing is, like, and then post 9/11, like I think the left took it as an opportunity to say, you know what? We get to take a new minority and prop them up. And so now you've seen like this mass exodus of Muslims who are like trying to side with like these LGBTQ, every kind of social justice activism you find out there, whether it's BLM, whether it's like transgender rights, LGBTQ rights, marriage equality, whatever you have. And it's a problem for us because for us on a spiritual level, forget about just the immediate. For me, I feel like in my community, on a spiritual level, it's dangerous for us. Like we're going to raise, emasculated men, women that can't be, good mothers and good role models for their children, and the same thing for the fathers. And right now, the left doesn't care about it. And I feel like at some point, the left, when they use it, I think here's my ultimate fear, is that when they get what they want from us, meaning their votes and the money for their politicians or their candidates, at the end, they're going to say, you know what? They're going to turn back and say, we don't like this part in your belief or your religion or your culture. You got to change this. Otherwise, you're backward. You are like you're a savage, or you are, you're too old. Like you have to accept, you have to be tolerant.
Essentially, they want to make us a cultural group and not a faith religion.
Yeah. That's
essentially what it is. Like an ethnic, like what happened to the Jews, man. Like that's why you only have like the Orthodox and Hasidics. They're like a minority. You got like people who call themselves atheist Jews. Like that doesn't make no sense.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You're gonna have the same thing with Muslims. Like there's people now who call themselves secular Muslims or agnostic Muslims. I'm like, yo, by definition, that's a contradiction.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, well, here's the thing, Brian, is that I was looking at some things, around the whole Hotep movement, and I came across some of these woke, black channels, and they were saying, well, Hotep is sure we get down with blackness, but the problem is that they're anti-women and they're homophobic, and so they can't be pro-black because they're against other black people who are maybe homosexual or feminist or whatever the term is they're using. How do you respond to that? How do you what is your take on that? Is that really true? I mean, is that the case?
Yeah, so in my book, Unbreakable Rules for Masculinity, it basically teaches you that whatever you respond to, you validate coming from feminine energy. So whenever I sense feminine energy, I don't respond to it. I don't give it a light of day. Like I said, I'm too busy building. I got like 8 fucking corporations I'm working on right now, most of them tech companies. So I don't respond to that stuff. I don't really care too much about that stuff anymore. That was a battle we fought many years ago. Before Trump even took office, that was a battle we fought with the black left. But I've washed my hands of that battle. I really don't care what they say, because if they speak our name, they're just going to give us more power. And I think they've noticed that we've been able to harness that, which is why they've sort of dialed back some of the hate.
Right.
But that's what socialists. Is
that true? Would you say Hotep is anti-women?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Would you say they're anti-gay?
No.
Okay.
So you could be a homosexual and still be accepted, be like part of Hotep, or would there be conditions to that?
The first president of Hotep Nation was a bisexual man.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Wow. Okay.
He was attracted to men. He used to say like, yo, he would say he was a delinquent for that behavior, a derelict. He would say that. He would, that's how he would talk about it. And, he's got a wife and kid now. But I think it's the difference between having a sexual orientation and then having a sexual orientation that you push upon other people. What happens in the bedroom is really a private matter. Sure. But I think what's happening is they're trying to infiltrate children's minds with it. And that's where we draw the line. You see that now with the Equality Act. I mean, I think it's also about preferential treatment, which sort of shows you the agenda. A little black boy had to dress up like a girl to have a conversation with Michelle Obama the other day, talking about Dwayne Wade's, Dwayne Wade's son or daughter or whatever that thing is now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is how they operate. This is who they push to the front. They're not really going to give us, and I don't expect them to, but they're not going to respect our likeness. Like China makes them put respect on their likeness. But again, I hold us wholly and completely accountable for that. I definitely expect our enemies to work against us. I believe that the financial bodies who run this country have this agenda for all people.
I mean, that's
and I don't find it special or selected for the Black community. A lot of people think it's selected for the Black community, but I think that would be narrow-minded. I believe it's, all of masculinity is under attack.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, because I think people just kind of miss something here, that I don't think you project victimhood. And I believe on that. I believe that I'm not denying wrongs that happen to different communities, but I'm opposed to victimhood. I'm opposed to making somebody make me feel like a victim. And I like that about you guys, that
no, what you mean to say is that you don't want to use your sense of oppression or victimhood to gain political ground. It's not, people automatically equate that, because you don't want to use victimhood, you're denying any kinds of oppression. That's not true at all.
No, that's why I prefaced that with saying I don't deny oppression happens, but I'm not going to use that to say that, now you should give me something. Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, my thing is like, look, I look at life like a road, right? And every oppression that you see is a detour or a road bump. If I got an end goal, if I want to make money, if I want to be a capitalist in America, if I want to do whatever it is, I got a goal in mind. If someone's blocking my way, my path, I'm going to go around that guy. I'm not going to waste my time arguing with the guy that's being a barrier for me. Do you get what I'm saying? And that's what I like about Hotep, because it's about accountability. And I feel like in a lot of our communities, the left wants to take away accountability from us. They want to tell us, hey, you can blame this person, you can blame that person. And they may even be right. But the problem is that going to benefit us? And I don't see that.
Sometimes you try to do something constructive, right? And then they push back. There's like a formula. But I do want to actually ask Brian a question. So, Brian, if I understand correctly, you are pro reparations, is that right? But through a certain means? Did I represent? Can you talk about reparations? Because that's something that I personally believe there should be some kind of reparations, right? Well, at the same time, I don't know that there's how the mechanism would be. That makes any sense? Like can you talk a little about reparations? I know you've
reparations is retribution to groups or individuals who have been done wrong. It is no secret that Black people have been done wrong from slavery on, right? I also make the case that I could probably plead a case that all races and all American citizens should be given reparations. So I don't just, when I say reparations, a lot of people think I'm thinking just a Black community. My interest is not in getting reparations for just a Black community. My interest is getting reparations for all communities that have been done wrong by the United States government. When we're talking about the Black community specifically, if I'm gonna say it one more time, if the problem is slavery that they want reparations for, that is not exactly a government issue to take up with. There are insurance and banking companies like AIG and Barclays who have already admitted to their role in slavery, and there can be suits brought against them and they can cut checks. So people don't have to worry about it coming from tax money, as many people fear, especially conservatives. They say, hey, I don't want to pay for this. It's going to come out of my taxes. Well, if it's a private suit against corporations, then no, it won't. When it comes to the government, I'm not interested in receiving their fiat notes or any type of currency for that matter. I'm very enthusiastic about decoupling us from some of the systems of the United States, like the Internal Revenue System and our Federal Reserve System, and some of the restraints they put on our lives, like taxes. So I'm looking for a tax exemption for a decade and beyond for any business or individual that is Black or Black owned.
No, that's great, because, I mean, on a deeper level, there are a couple of things to talk about there. Number one, I mean, I think you're also a cryptocurrency enthusiast. I am myself. I've been in Bitcoin for since 2017. I think, around 2017. I'm
a Bitcoin and crypto realist.
Yeah.
I'm not enthusiastic. I'm not enthusiastic about it at all.
I think what you're saying is that Bitcoin is actually an agent of the state, right? and you might as well just get on board with it because they're gonna like.
No, I don't think it's. I don't think it's an agent of the state. It's definitely a creation. The SHA-256 algorithm is definitely a creation of the NSA. Tor, the deep web browser, is a creation of the Central Intelligence Agency. These are no secrets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
some things are created by them, which are decentralized, which allow them to make certain maneuvers. The thing is, our participation cloaks their participation. Alex Jones has been riffing for a while now about a one world digital currency. This looks like this could be that. There are a lot of cryptocurrencies in the talk right now, such as many of the USD stable coins, so on and so forth. Bitcoin is, if you follow Gresham's law, I've actually modified it a bit, called Hotep Jesus' law of modern monetary theory. And basically what it is Gresham's law says good money drives out bad money. And what I say is bad money turns good money into a reserve asset. And that's what Bitcoin has become. It's not money because people don't want to buy coffee with it or shoes with it. Nobody wants to give up their Bitcoin. They want to hoard it because it's going to go up in price and it's holding the value. And they get to, it's really a short or a hedge against the dollar. That's really what people are doing. They're cutting their losses on the dollar when they invest in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the reason why I got started investing in this is, and I call myself an enthusiast. The reason being is because I do believe that it can be not just Bitcoin in itself, but cryptocurrencies. I believe that it allows the common man to obtain currency and to be able to transact without using banks.
The real thing is what you hit on at the end there. It's permissionless.
Yeah, and that's my point. Like, I don't want to be dealing with banks. I don't want to pay a transfer fee. I don't want to pay MT 799 fees when I'm doing international bank transfers.
Or you still pay fees with crypto.
Sure, but the thing is that I can have a peer-to-peer network where I can set that up completely without any bank if I really want to do that, right?
Yeah.
And with the fiat currency, I couldn't do that. Like, there's no way I can no one will recognize my currency, right? Yeah. I can, and that potential to me is something that I believe, that decentralized potential is what I believe is really important in the future going forward. But regardless of that, I think the bottom line is this. I think the main idea behind the push behind it, I think maybe even on your side, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the real way to move forward and to grow as a community is financial independence without being dependent on the state.
Economic independence.
Okay, yeah, that's another way. Yeah, economic and financial independence, and I think that's ultimately what the goal is here. When you're talking about
the difference between financial independence and economic dependence is, economic independence is still financial. I mean, financial independence is still financial dependency because you're still dependent upon their currency and all the laws that come along with the monetary act of 1980, right? Mm-hmm. You're still under that 1933 rule of law, 1913 rule of law. It's economic independence is the goal. Economic independence means that we have our own means of production and distribution. And then the next level to that would be the creation and distribution and exchange of currency. That would lead to financial independence. But without economic independence, you can't have financial independence.
It makes sense. But that's kind of why, going back to the reparations argument, and that's kind of why I do feel like, and I'm kind of agreeing with Maheen on this one, is that I do feel like whether it's a government entity or a insurance agent owes Black people reparations because of like places like Tulsa, Oklahoma, when they had economic independence, they had Black Wall Street. And people oftentimes forget about that that they try to go out and do a separate economic, have economic independence. And, a lot of people try to undermine that. And I think that was, to be honest, I think people maybe look at back in history.
It's a scarcity problem. It's a scarcity problem. You see, when you have abundance, you don't look to attack others unless you think there's scarcity on the horizon. When those whites down in Tulsa, Oklahoma saw those Black people operating independently, and flourishing, it was scarcity that caused them to act on the emotions of envy and jealousy, which manifested as violence. This scarcity has been coerced and manipulated and coaxed by the United States government via the monetary and financial policies of Congress, the mismanagement of the Secretary of Treasury, Federal Reserve Board, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
You see, the white man in this country has never been treated or has never been given any upward mobility. Any upward mobility is probably due to pure chance and luck. It's due to the lack of restrictions and not the introduction of restrictions. But it's been made very hard. Every time somebody in this country comes up, there have been new restrictions put in place. I remember at a time when you could grow hemp in your backyard, and the chemical companies, DuPont, lobbied to have hemp made illegal. This is a crime against humanity. When you make a plant illegal, that's a crime against humanity. There's thousands of products, hundreds at the minimum, that were being created from hemp. And one of them was included biodegradable plastic, as opposed to the chemical plastic we have nowadays that's polluting our earth. These restrictions that were passed through Congress is what causes strife between people.
Right. So let me ask you, is it possible, well, two questions. First of all, is it possible to have an autonomous or economic independent community within like the current system in America? Like, do you think that would be possible, like with the federal government there? And what would that look like to you? Like, what does that look like to a Hotep nation?
Well, all we got to do is follow the work of Rajneesh. Rajneesh, I believe people know him as Osho now, or Osha, or whatever his name is now. But he took out a quiet town and tied it down. Increased the population, where he took over local government, set up shop, set up his own brewery, set up his own set of laws and ways of life and airport, so on and so forth, which I think is a great demonstration of the freedom you can have in America. What you'll need with that is a strong team of attorneys who have lots of case law on their side, because the Supreme Court could go either way, depending on what justice is feeling what way at that time. We've had many times that the Supreme Court has gone against the Constitution. We have many times that they have protected the Constitution. We've had justices who have protected the Constitution and who have gone against it, all because of interpretation. So you're going to need a mean team of attorneys and people who study enough case law and have that case law ready to go, so that when the federal government wants to impose its mandates on your local vicinity, you can invoke your rights as a state, as a city within that state.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty big endeavor. I just don't know how the federal government, would respond, because we've seen movements like this in the past.
You got to be quiet. A lot of people, what they do is they get movements like this, and they want to be all on TV and showboating and on Twitter and telling everybody about it. So you're making it hot. If you learn anything in the hood about doing anything that the government might not like, is one thing is you keep shit quiet. Mm-hmm. Same thing with the mob. When they wanted to move around, the mob knew, just don't bring too much attention.
Right.
Yeah. Well, do you ever hear, Hotep, you ever hear about this Islamburg in upper New York, upstate New York? They have a lot of, like, I don't know, what ethnicities it mainly comprise of?
So there's a place in upstate New York, and it's called Islamburg, and it's a bunch of African-American Muslims and some other ones, majority African-American Muslims that wanted to be away from the major city. And they came from like Philly, from Maryland, from New York, from Jersey, even out from the West Coast. And they originally set this thing back up in the 90s. And then it got a lot of heat because like they were out there also training, like they were like having target practice, and they were just training their sons and daughters to be in martial arts, and they had a school, they had everything.
They weren't doing anything violent like against the government. They're just training. Like they're just, you know,
just like what crazy militias do out in Michigan. Like everyone has the right to have a weapon, right? They were just owning weapons and training on their own property. Caught some heat, but you know, and make a long story short, eventually, like the local sheriffs understood that this group is just minding their business, and even though there's people who protest them, the sheriffs now take their side and say just stay off their property.
Yeah.
So they got their own little compound where they have their own schools, their hospitals, the living quarters. You know, the communal. It's a commune basically. They all live off the land, and that's it. And they have their own little community out there.
And they infiltrated the heck out of that place. I mean, they had so many moles in there, they couldn't find a shred of evidence linking them to terrorism or any kind of acts of violence against the government or the state. It's now they still exist. They're just very low key. They don't talk about it. They're not up
There's
there.
not even like a website, nothing.
There's no website. There's no recruiting centers. There's no advertisements where they go appeal to the mainstream Muslims in America. They encouraging them to join their community. They just do their thing and they don't talk about it. It's like I said.
Yeah, you know what though? Let me ask you about this though. I oftentimes think about like what causes this economic disparity in America, right? And I feel like, you know, because, you know, being a son of an immigrant, and I see certain people that have opportunities and some that don't, right? And I've been blessed, fortunately, to have opportunities. And so I see that some people just don't, and it's not a product of my own being. I'm born into something that some people just don't have. But I look at this and I see, you know what? I think one of the biggest problems that we have is wage stagnation. If you look at inflation versus what people are being paid now, it's just astronomical a difference. I mean, like what if you look at, I mean, how much inflation has been to the 1980s, and you look at how much the wage has risen, the minimum wage since the 1980s, it's peanuts, right? And so if you can't solve the problem, if you can't pay a worker what he's owed, you know, you're gonna have problems. That's just how I look at it. You know, and that's, we have a tradition in our hadith where the Prophet says, you know, pay a man before his sweat drops from his eyebrow. You know, don't let him go a day without getting his pay, right? And now you see people going on like, you know, unequal pay and then like weeks without pay. People are going to get hungry. It's what it is.
Yeah, inflation is America's culture. Inflation is America's financial culture. I'm going to say it one more time. Inflation is America's financial culture. If we go look at the Bretton Woods Agreement, 1941, 44, I think it was 44. The Bretton Woods Agreement. You basically put the United States as the reserve currency for all these other nations. I think it was 44 nations. And the only nation that was required to back their currency with gold was the United States. So we backed all these defunct countries and their poor financial decisions with our currency, then backed our currency with gold, and then lent them our dollars to which they could turn in for gold. And they had several runs. Switzerland had a run on our bank. I believe France had a run on our bank into the hundreds of millions. I believe it was 121 million in gold they were able to take from the United States. And then what happens following the Bretton Woods Agreement is actually the Nixon shock. And that's when Nixon finally takes us off of the gold standard. And that's in 1971. Once we come off the gold standard, we're basically into the realm of unlimited inflation. You see, before you were tied to the gold currency, so you had to try and finagle the numbers to make it make sense and say, all right, we'll just, you know, devalue our currency against gold. You know, our currency's basically been devalued to zero. And the only thing that backs it is the United States military. But inflation is America's financial culture and has been for a very long time. You know, if you're talking about the Bank of North America, the first Bank of the United States, the second Bank of the United States, subsequently, you'll find that many of these banking acts that were attempts to create a central bank happened to be right around wartime. World War I dragged us into the Bretton Woods Agreement. So and World War II was starting to brew then too. So you start to see the tie behind wars and debt. And to get through this debt, they issued these banknotes. But now, since there's nothing to back it by, inflation gets to run wild, or quantitative easing and printing of money.
Yeah,
which is the theft of labor.
So here's the $1 million question: you think there's any goals to left at Fort Knox?
Isn't that what everybody asks? Is it a goal?
Where to go there, right? Everybody wants to know because people get. Because I'll tell you something. Remember back in 2008, right, where like people lost money. Like, there were straight up local banks that shut down, and they could. The FDIC only guarantees only up to $100,000. If you had more than $100,000 and didn't have additional insurance on that money, well, sorry, you lost your money. If the bank shut down, well, too bad. Take them to court. And who's gonna take a bank to court? I mean, most commoners, they can't. I mean, you need a class action lawsuit to take most banks to court, right? I mean, the local banks, you're not gonna have that kind of money to fight these things in court. And people lost money, and so I think people began to think about, hey, well, what's my alternative? Am I really dependent on fiat currency, paper money? And a lot of times people think it's free, money printed from nothing. I mean, in reality, the way it really works, is I think this as well, is that the government puts out bonds, and if people are going to buy the bonds, then they'll go back to the Federal Reserve and say, look, hey, print money. We got people going to invest in these bonds. The problem now that we're seeing is that the bond market is saying, hey, look, we don't trust you guys to pay back the money. Like usually bonds were solid, like 10 years you had, and it was like a guaranteed return, right? Like these are sovereign guarantees. Now the bond market is flexing signals that, we're not too sure that 10 years is enough for us to pay back these bonds. And that's causing people into a panic.
Is that related to the credit rating? Like the American credit rating was devalued or
along with that, but that happened, I believe, because of the fact that the government was asking the Federal Reserve to drop interest rates temporarily to stimulate the economy. They're loaning out money, and now they've been basically just paying back the interest. But now the interest, even just paying back the interest, they can't pay it all back. Like even the interest is not covering it. Before a traditional loan, you pay back interest and you pay back the principal. Before they were just not paying back the principal, just paying the interest, let them build up the minimum interest payment. And now that minimum interest payment is too high to pay back. So that makes everyone nervous.
So you're saying that right now our economy is built on a house of cards, and
it's credit,
and it's bound to collapse. And our ultimately, we should be looking towards the cryptocurrency markets as our backup plan. If all this stuff
it collapses. Could be crypto,
guns.
Guns.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. Because usually, the only way America usually comes back from this is by starting a war, right?
Well, when I say guns, I mean guns are the best reserve asset. Pull up Smith & Wesson stock. Pull up, one of those other gun stocks. But go look at the price of an AR-15 over the years and how that's increased. Go look at the price of ammunition. I think price of ammunition is up 100% year over year. So when I say buy guns, I'm talking about buy like physical firearms and ammo. And I'm not saying that as a prepper or to, saying violence. I'm saying nothing holds value like a weapon, like a firearm, like ammo. Yeah. Over time, like nothing holds its value like that.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I didn't even think about it because we were just the other day we were looking up some of the guns that were discontinued. I think me and Mort were looking through some websites for Colts and things that might be a little bit popular due to like The Walking Dead and stuff, making some of these weapons more popular. But we're like, holy cow! Can you believe this gun is $10,000? And it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, like I have an M4 carbine, and it costs like $1,100. You know what I mean? I know it's not going to go down in value. I can sell that anytime I want to for more. I mean, because and if you're going to try to move it on the side, you can sell for even more money, right? I mean, it just doesn't really matter when stuff hits the fan, right? So that's a great point. I never even thought about it that way. I just thought about like just personal protection.
Yeah, I mean, people now are buying basketball cards again because that's the thing that's popping, but that's cyclical too, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I think a gun actually has real usage though,
right? Like, you'll need it if it gets crazy.
You can't put a price on safety.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, when the police is gone,
when the economy is gone and we're on the barter system,
Yeah.
I think ammunition will be very valuable.
I mean, my Michael Jordan rookie won't really help me out.
I'll trade you 10 bullets for your cow.
Yeah, I know, and this is really interesting because I've been over Africa. I was telling these guys before. Some people heard in a different podcast because I used to trade in non-ferrous metals, and I remember being throughout Africa, and I would encounter certain places in Ghana, and I went to Tarkwa and Kumasi, and there were people that were trading, bartering rice for gold nuggets. They were trading gold dust for rice, and to them, I thought about it. I'm like, why are they doing that? But to them, that rice is more important than the gold dust because they can get that whenever they want, right? But I look at that in a time where the bubble is going to happen. I'm like, we're going to go back to that where, all this material stuff that you have that you think is worth money is not going to be worth anything except for the basics that you need.
Right. Since Mort mentioned Africa, so Brian, I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, that when someone becomes they want to become Hotep, I don't know what the proper term is, but you start at the individual level. You talk about health and plant-based diets and reform, the reforming of the self first, right? And then the community. Would it make sense, or do you guys think about maybe we talked about community in America, that maybe going to a place like Africa? I know a dude who he's 85 years old. He was on my podcast, and he just moved to the Gambia,
right?
2 days ago.
Oh wow!
Right, and he's talking about off the money he's making with his VA and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, man, I got enough money now to get 2 wives and get a house. I'm get that US dollar. So if there's a way to because you're an entrepreneur, you got this tech background, your money's golden anyway globally, right? You're encouraging entrepreneurship. And then you go to a place where you have land and your money's going to go a lot further and you can, live off the land. I mean, is that something you guys think about maybe as a place for a community in whether Africa or wherever, anywhere else in the world, not limiting yourself to the United States?
Africa will be the new America. Africa right now is secretly under the gold rush. And I say that euphemistically speaking, of course, as an analogy. As men were moving out west in the Americas to conquer new territory and land and to get gold, the same thing's happening in Africa. Many nations are coming into Africa and seizing resources and bartering for resources and making deals for resources. There's plenty of land there. But there's, just like the gold rush, the people with resources are going to be the first ones to go seize the assets and really set up shop. And that's what we're experiencing right now in Africa. It's very quiet. You won't hear a lot of people talking about it. But if you can actually Google Africa, the new America. So when this financial system collapses, they'll build their same model in Africa, and then that one will topple, and then some other place, maybe China, will be the new America. Who knows?
So that's really interesting because when I was in Africa, I saw a bunch of Chinese people, boatload of Chinese people.
A word?
They were going to the bush, they were coming in. They had vans every couple of hours going back and forth from the bush and back. They were taking resources, whether it be gold, silver, tungsten, diamond, whatever it was. They were just bringing it back, and they try to cover that by saying, "Oh, we're building infrastructure, we're building roads," because they have companies that build highways and things like that, right? But they're they're trying to beat the West and getting their foothold over these resources, because it's not just people look at just diamonds and gold, but it's more than that. It's copper, it's tungsten, it's even oil, in Angola. There's a lot of stuff out there as a continent.
China will do a deal based upon the future discovery of a natural resource, saying, "Look, I'll build you a hospital, stadium, and some roads. You don't have any resources you found yet, but when you do, that's our shit."
Yeah.
These are the type of deals China sets up.
So let me ask you this. So since you're big in the crypto thing, and I thought about this too. I thought one of the biggest problems I had when I was in Africa was I thought I uncovered, not me personally, but there are many Africans that have wealth. They have access to wealth, meaning, for example, whether it be gold or silver or whatever natural product they have. The problem is being able to export that out to countries that want it, right? Because most banks, you need money to file for exports, right? And you need, there are banking instruments that are used in order for people to, create guarantees in order for you to ship a product, CIF, right? Or, crate on crate. The problem is no one wants to whatever, if it's a conspiracy, I don't know what it is, but they don't work with African banks. They don't have like the same credit ratings, whatever it was, or same banking systems. So they're forced to deal with banks like, HSBC and Wells Fargo, and and they're not going to get anywhere near. They can't afford to deal with these banks. But do you think cryptocurrency, blockchain, forget crypto, the blockchain in of itself could create some kind of way out for Africans themselves to now become the sole exporter of their products? Because right now you look at Africa, they're not the sole exporters of their own products. It's other people that come in and do it, right? And I think that's a truly going to be a monumental moment, because I'm looking at Cardano, and they're doing some stuff in Ethiopia where private citizens will be able to make all of their information private and monetize their own information as they please with Cardano, with some Cardano project. I think it's amazing.
I think you got to be mindful of your imports and exports. It's not always worrying about what your exports are, but you got to be mindful of what you're importing as well, because what you're importing could be destroying your financial system, or it could be destroying your culture, which could eventually destroy your financial system. So we got to be careful what they import. As far as the exports, it doesn't make sense to export that stuff. If I had natural resources and I had gold, I'd be trying to tuck the shit away so nobody even knew about it. So we had a plan, a good sound plan, to say, okay, here's how we can start moving this stuff around, right? And then you secretly start moving some of these assets around in a way that makes sense. Now, I've been studying money for a good amount of time right now. And so the question that you asked me is a very difficult one, because you have financial sharks in all of the oceans. So it's really tough to figure out what to do with that situation. But if I was Africa, I wouldn't export my resources. I'd hoard them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the problems we have, though, whether you're in Africa or the Middle East, is that we have a common theme of leadership that is interested in lining their pockets more than improving the situation of their society.
How is that unique from any other politician?
That's true, but the level of depravity, I think, in other societies, there is some kind of common goal that they have, that, well, you know what, we have to preserve America's superiority, in military and other cultural aspects. But with, at least from what I've seen in my own examination of the Muslim world and in Africa and other impoverished countries, is that the military, the institutions of power are more interested in how they can exploit those resources that they have within their countries to.
What you're talking about is institutions that lack power.
Yeah.
These people are making selfish decisions for the individual because they lack power to do better for themselves.
Right.
They don't have power. They just happen to be a middleman between the sharks and the people. And that happens to be a profitable position to be in for the individual. They are actually powerless, because if they were powerful, they'd have the ability to say no. But exactly. They know what comes with the problem of saying no. What you got to understand is that the money powers create a balance of power. If said country is getting too powerful, okay, let's lower their power. They did that with Russia. They did it with Germany. They did it with the United States. They create balance of power. So when somebody's getting a little too powerful, they find ways to balance it out.
Exactly. And that's what when we see
so
China,
the United States you never really had politicians who, you had a few politicians that to look out for us, but overwhelmingly shit got passed in Congress that was never supposed to be passed in Congress. Woodrow Wilson was pretty much a whole damn puppet.
Who would you think looked out for us as a politician? I'm curious. Who do you think looked out for us?
Ron Paul, Cynthia McKinney.
Okay, good. I thought you were gonna tell me like JFK. I was gonna be like, oh, don't tell me that JFK really cared for people.
No. I'm talking about real G's. Andrew Jackson.
Okay. Okay, with his monetary. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Jefferson. A little bit. The Jeffersonian movement was pretty much
kind of like a libertarian type, where you just You do.
It had some libertarian leanings in there. It was very anti-central bank. So at least it gave us a glimmer of hope as far as money was concerned.
I can see that. Yeah. Okay, good.
And I mean, and that's not to say there are many, we got Senator Stewart out of Alabama in the 1980s. He's expressed a lot of concerns for some of the monetary policy in America. You don't see it often. I've had to go in the congressional record to find this information because it's not like readily available. So you have to like find an act that was passed and then go through all the congressional records and then sift through. Like I've sat down and like skimmed through 100 pages just to find somebody who had a dissenting opinion against some of these bills. And then I take note. I'm like, all right, who is this guy and where is he from? Right. So, for example, like Senator Stewart out of Alabama in 1980. You know what I mean? So you got them. They exist, but they're wholly powerless because they're outnumbered by the people who have already been bribed.
Yeah. So speaking about that, let me ask you this: how do you feel about like just the voting in American politics in general? And I'll tell you why I asked that question after you answer. Like, how do you feel?
Oh yeah, I don't vote. That's just stupid.
Yeah, so and I'm glad you said that because a lot of times a lot of the Muslims have been siding with the left and Democrats because they want to have power, they want to be represented, they want to be safe because they feel like the right doesn't like Muslims and they hate Arabs or whatever it may be. They want to kick out Muslims and Islam. But I said, man, money talks. If it was up to me, I would say instead of wasting your money and your time on campaigns and people, create a lobby that will be able. These politicians love money, and if you can use your lobby to persuade these people, because a lot of people say a lot of things before they get elected, but when they're elected behind office, it's the lobbyists and the corporations that make them do things, right? So I would say if you're going to be involved in the process at all, save your money. Don't campaign for nobody. Don't canvass for nobody. Don't donate to anybody. Donate to your own PAC and then have them influence the politicians later on. Say, hey, if you want this money, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. Otherwise, we ain't going to give it to you. That's how I feel.
Yeah. You got to decouple yourself from the Democratic Party and the Liberal Party and the Republican Party, too. You have to decouple yourself from those things and operate outside of that paradigm to influence both of them. The big problem is we don't pit the two against each other enough. The two pit us against ourselves, the people. But we got to look out for our best interests, and siding with one party or the other basically looks out for their own interests and not ours. But I think a PAC is good. Creating lobbying groups is good. That's some good ideas there. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I remember because I think when Uncle Hotep was on Nabil's podcast back in 2016, I think he asked him about. He's like, "Listen, the thing to do that would be smart for me not even to vote, but I'm probably going to vote for Trump, right? Just because of sometimes it's like you're like, well, I'm not at the end of the day, voting requires very little energy too, right? I could be driving by, I'd be like, oh, the center's open, let me pop in there right quick. It's like 10 minutes." Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like I got a restroom break. You know what I'm saying? It's not that. It's people. And what's the funny thing is people think that it's like commitment. You're invested. No, man. It's just drive by, pick some ballots, peace.
Yeah, I never got that because you know how they talk about it's your sacred duty to go out and vote. I never felt like anything sacred going out and vote. I mean,
for me now, I get time off work to go vote. Paid time off work. Yeah. So I'm like, I might as well use it.
Yeah, I'm like who's in office doesn't matter. What needs to be talked about is how the government operates.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter who you got in that seat when you got a bill with bills inside of bills inside of bills inside of bills. So by the time you unpackage this 7,000 page document, it's just like, yo, we talked about this problem and you created 10,000 problems within this document that never even existed before. All right. Like, oh, we need gender studies in Pakistan. What the does that have to do with us? How does this go into a bill along with the COVID relief plan? Like that doesn't make sense. So the way our government operates, until I see a fix in that, I have no hope for any politician, benevolent or malevolent.
Bro, I was talking to somebody, a mutual friend of ours, and he goes, he's a backpacker. He goes everywhere. He was in Tibet, and he went. He's a dentist, and so he went there, like with this lady who gets funding to go to Tibet because America's cool with Tibet and to undermine China. So to get like cultural funding to go over to Tibet. And he just goes over there and he's like trying to like talk about the Uyghurs and China because they have to go through China to get to Tibet, right? And he's on this basically on this so-called dental mission, right? I mean, but it's really just money to go there and influence Tibetans and how Americans are cool, right? Pretty much, right? And I'm saying, well, we waste money on these things all day long. Like, we got, like, for example, North Korea points missiles at Guam and we send them food aid monthly. Mm-hmm. If that was up to me, I wouldn't send them a goddamn thing until you take those missiles off us. Like, are you kidding me, right? And I think like this whole world of diplomacy, like I think we're in the habit of buying people, right? We're such a consumerist nation that we think we can just go buy other nations, and it's leaked into our foreign policy. I don't think we'll get away from it for a long time. You
said who's pointing guns at who?
Well, I said North Korea had a missile pointed at Guam. Remember when they had a little pointed at the ICBM they had?
And who provided aid to who?
America gave aid to North Korea, food aid.
So again, balance of power. North Korea aims gun at Guam. Guam is U.S. territory. United States gives guns and assistance to North Korea. It's a balance of power game being played by the money interests.
But I see it getting put in the bills. I'm like, I don't feel like paying for this stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, you think about it, like, hey man, because I'll be honest. Like, I see people in we live in Chicago and different areas. We drive around. We see people that need money out here. People that it's not about people and stuff, but like schools. The basic thing that you expect the government to provide, like roads and stuff that that we could utilize right here, and it just feels a little weird to see that money go somewhere overseas. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Well, what the government will say, or someone who's at least truthful in there would say that is that this is all your money that is being used overseas is to maintain American supremacy in the South China Sea and in the important trade routes where America is going to be levying taxes and tariffs and making sure that more revenue is being generated and being ingested by the American people.
Yeah, no, I heard the argument where that it's just about keeping diplomacy and world dominance, right? But the problem is when it comes back and bites you, like when China and America go into a trade war, right? Or like when you have,
China and America went into trade war because America realized they were sleeping on China, and they didn't realize how quickly China is catching up. And then they started reacting. Well, we can't have we had our foot on their neck for decades, and now they've managed to squeeze out of it. And they're going to catch up sooner or later. So we have to do whatever we can to get that supremacy again.
Yeah, see, I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like a lot of Americans just got lazy. And Chinese aren't lazy right now. They're still hungry. So if you're not hungry, it's going to be hard to play, it's going to be hard to compete. Right? Like Americans got used to a cush life. Like, they have, invented a lot of things. They have a lot of ingenuity. And all these things, with like corporations like Microsoft, Oracle, Apple. But after a while, you get comfortable. Mm-hmm. You're not hungry, right? China's hungry. Like they got 1 billion people that are hungry, 1.5 billion, right? So I feel like you just can't, like, there's no competition, really. I just don't see it.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, I have a question about the reception of Hotep within the Black community. Because I think what you're talking about, a lot of it, when you speak to Black people, like at least my contacts, a lot of them come from the streets, and they would resonate with what you're talking about. They're definitely not identifying with like the liberal, democratic platform. But again, it's very like I think I was trying to find a Hotep, like I don't know if it's a center in Chicago. I couldn't find one. Like I guess it's a two-angle question. What do you think? What are the roadblocks for Hotep in the Black community or is it being well received and we're just not aware of it? Or are people manifesting in other ways like Hebrew Israelites, Nation of Islam, maybe some legacy of Marcus Garvey kind of situation? Can you just explain that, like the reception of Hotep within the Black community?
The hood is Hotep. Drive through a hood is Hotep. The only thing that's not Hotep about the Black communities is Black liberals. You got to remember when hip hop first started out, Go look at how Queen Latifah dressed. Go look at Tupac and what he stood for. Tupac was Hotep. You used to find a lot of cats used to wear the traditional African garb from Ghana, Nigeria, or what have you. But hip hop used to be Hotep. It wasn't until the commercialization of Bad Boy Records and Dr. Dre Out West came with gangster music that things went a different route, right? But the hood, we've always been Hotep. The thing is, they just show you the black liberal on TV. That's all they'll show you. And if they do show you a Hotep, it'll be like a joke, right?
Van Jones.
Yeah.
Van Jones was convincing people on election night or a few days after election night, that Donald Trump, he's got a sneaky plan where he's going to take over the government through loopholes in the U.S. Constitution. He's going to maintain his. I couldn't believe I'm looking at a man who is supposed to be the benchmark of what you're seeing him on CNN, the flagship of American media.
Nobody in the hood is paying attention to Van Jones.
Yeah.
See, these people exist to convince white America what the black community is. They don't exist for us. They exist for white America. So white America goes, hey, black people, why do y'all think like this? Then you go ask the hood and they be like, yo, who the fuck is Van Jones? Who the fuck? Who are these people you're talking about? Right?
It's like really. I was Brian. I don't want to delve into too much, but an example of this is that a week ago I interviewed Richard Spencer, the founder of the alt-right, on my channel, and I just put a tweet about it, right, and it went freaking viral. Like a bunch of leftist Muslims from like Australia and Great England started commenting about how this is a slap in the face of black people in America. So let me read you a message to a friend of mine who grew up in the South Side. He's educated, actually went to Northwestern.
He went to a university?
Went to Northwestern University, does like nonviolence work. And what he basically told me was like, I work at anti-violence. There are people whose speech actually directly leads to black people losing their lives. An 11-year-old girl was just killed this week. It offends me that so much outrage is directed at theoretical or discourse level. Folks may dislike Spencer. I'm not finding him myself. But his virtue signaling is dumb. And so it's like and we get this pushback too. Sometimes we would have like an African-American imam on the show before, and we'd ask him a question, and Mort would get like hate messages from like South Asian attorneys who are in the suburbs talking about like, you're offensive to black people. I've talked to multiple African-Americans this past week. Hey, do you think about... They're like, yeah, we don't got a problem with it. Most of our community doesn't even know who the hell Richard Spencer is.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No, but let me tell you this, though. Like, so
that's frustrating as hell.
Yeah, it was my take on BLM. I said, listen, it's odd to me that you have a bunch of lesbian women who are using the death of straight black men to make a movement. Like, it was just odd to me that happened, right? And that offended a lot of people, right? That, basically for us, like, in the new liberal Muslim community, if you're not down with BLM, you're basically a non-Muslim now. Like if you don't have faith in BLM, how dare you? Because now they put together like this LGBTQ with BLM, and now we've got women in hijab out there protesting with these people. Some are congresswomen, and they're out there and they equate these two together. So when I push back on something that I'm not cool with, all of a sudden now I'm not one of you guys anymore. I'm a coon, or I'm Uncle Tom, or something like that. You get what I'm saying? This is kind of what's happening now. And I feel like that, man, it's just, I think what's going to happen is a lot of people are just like, I think what you said is really right. Like people who are living in the neighborhoods, who live in the community, they're not going to tolerate this. They're going to be like, hey, we don't know who these people are. They're on the TV. We don't know Don Lemon, and we don't know Van Jones. We don't know these kind of people. We don't know. I mean, I think there are token minorities that the left wants to put up. It happens with brown people, with black people, with Asian people. Yeah. It happens with every kind of people because they want to say, "Oh, look, that's that token, color person."
No, not just that, but an emasculated. Like you see him on that night, just a few days ago. I know many of you guys had to have seen it because you literally saw a man who, it's on the surface level looks like strong and upright, but he's on the verge of tears because he thinks that the election is going to be stolen from him. And you see a man who's now who's lost, like who's so deep into his feelings, because I don't think he was acting. I think he genuinely
believed it.
He believes it.
Yeah.
He's internalized these beliefs of victimhood and racism and structural oppression on him. I'm like, yes, there is structural racism, and I'm not denying those aspects of it. But he's bought into this narrative so deeply and hook, line, and sinker that he's convinced himself that the election's going to drop.
And what's funny is that I come from a generation, you know, and he mentioned early hip hop, and I was big on that. I'm talking about like KRS-One, Rakim, all these old school guys, that Brand Nubian, that you could tell it was all about positivity, right? But there was a line by Scarface, and I always remind, I never seen a man cry till I seen a man die. Right. And now you see all these men just crying about politics. Like, no, Hillary lost. No, and my life is over. Like, they're just getting mad. Like, they were literally, and that's kind of why, like, I don't want to say enjoy, but I kind of I had entertainment in seeing Donald Trump win, because some of these people thought that like the world was over. And I was thinking, like, at the end of the day, like, my life didn't really change that much. I mean, there's hyperbole. I get it. Don't get me wrong. There is stupid stuff that he says, but in reality, did my life change very much as a person in America? It really didn't. Not under Obama, not under Trump, and not under Biden. Is not changing.
I mean, one thing Brian said earlier was what I think. Like, I understand there are wrongs being done by the state and like people of different, you know, against, you know, there's shootings that happen, there's police brutality. I get, like, I'm not knocking any of that stuff, right? But I think our energy is finite, right? And people who just comment about it and just complain aren't doing anything constructive, you know?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's the thing. You have to I think it's fine to we should recognize those things, but keep building, keep reaching out, coalition building, businesses, these kind of things should be done. I think that's my take.
I mean, complaining and recognizing are two different things.
Right. Recognizing, but then like
nobody likes a whiner.
Right. If you just complain the whole time, like some people, that's their entire, I'm like, we all 24 hours in a day. And it's like some people who are so-called academics, their entire thing is like hunting down tweets and retweeting things and like calling people out across the world.
Yeah, I think this whole cancel. What's your take on this whole cancel culture? I think we've all been kind of maybe victim, or maybe like, you know, they're trying to like, you know, put this thing on us where you're going to cancel you, right? And we always get this this threat from like our own community that, hey, if you don't retract what you're going to say, we're going to make an expose about you guys, right? But no one really cares, but we just, you know. So has the woke Black community tried to cancel Hotep or you guys out? Like, you ever face any of that problem?
Before Donald Trump was president, they tried to cancel me because I was calling out Black Lives Matter for the LGBT organization that they were, and the fact that they tried to omit Black men from their website. And a lot of people ask me, you know, how are you able to keep your account over all these years? And it's the fact that there's a big wall between me and these Black liberals because they all blocked me before Trump got into office. So when I see some of my Black followers, you know, and they tweeting or retweeting their friends, I just see a link. I don't even see people's accounts because there's like a big wall between me and like fake Black Twitter, right? Because there's real Black Twitter and there's fake Black Twitter. The funny thing is, when you're glued into the right side of Black Twitter, like the original side, you see a lot of whispers of things that they don't agree with that's coming down through the liberal agenda. You know, some are like that trans, LGBT, kids, pedophile, all that shit, right? That stuff you won't see go viral, though. Like the algorithm be holding that shit back. You know, they be hiding, hide them tweets, and, you know, you might not see it on your timeline. And but I see it, you know. But they, like I said, they control what you see. That's the power of the liberal lobby. Like I said before, there's two types of white people in America. You got red whites and blue whites. And the red whites, they can hurt your feelings, but the blue whites can hurt your pockets. So while Black people are sitting around trying to figure out who it is that wasn't hiring them all these years, who is ruining their image in the media, who is locking them up, you got to look at the people who have the power to cancel you today, because it surely isn't the conservatives. They are the ones being canceled. The red whites are being canceled by the blue whites, as we saw with that young lady who was on The Mandalorian or whatever her name was. But you know what I'm talking about.
That big girl.
Yeah.
Very muscular.
So the left has all the power. They have all the Yeah, they got all the power. So they control what we see, what we think, what we hear, what we eat, what we dance to, what we watch. I mean, they're just wholly in control. You know, I like just divest and investing, divest from the bullshit, invest in the hot shit.
Gotcha.
So that's what I do. You know, my intention and everything. Like sometimes the timeline will be talking about like, you know, I don't know, something that's totally like left wing, and I'll just come on the timeline like, you know, socialism is nothing without capitalism, because I'm my mind all day is just thinking about the ruin of socialism and how colonialism is nothing without socialism. So I'm always like stuck in history while people are like thinking about the stuff that's happening now. I'm looking back in history and trying to think like, all right, when did this start? Who was opposed to this? How did they oppose it? Right.
Yeah.
So
I saw that black socialist lady and knocked that phone out of your hand. She got
oh
mad.
yeah, that was
She got real mad.
What happened?
He was trying. There was this black socialist. I was having a conversation with him, and he was trying to. He put forward some arguments, and she didn't like the arguments. She, I gotta go. I got no time for that. I gotta go. And she just knocked the phone out of his hand.
She took it out of my hand and threw it down.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
You can mess with a lot of things. Not my phone, man.
Yeah.
Sure.
How's your guys' relationship, or with like, what's your perspective on like black conservatives, like ranging? I mean, they're two different people. Like someone like a Candace Owens, or someone like a Jesse Lee Peterson. Is that someone or do you think they're just, or are they just pawns of the conservative movement? Like, what would your take be on those kind of folks?
What if they giving us that's new?
Yeah. I mean, Jesse Lee Peterson to me, like he's the clown, bro. I mean, he's funny to watch. I mean, something he'll have some good points, but I think he's just a token of the right. I mean, they're just using him like Candace Owens. I mean, I don't see they don't provide a unique perspective that I would say if I was a black man, I'm like, yo, what are they providing to me that's unique? I don't see it.
Yeah, it's always the ideological people. You know when they're defending indefensible positions that they're ideological, and they don't, no matter what you respond with, they're gonna just come up with any kind of illogical explanation and try to get you to shut up.
Yeah, like Jesse Lee Peterson was trying to defend slavery. He was like, I'm glad I ended up over here in America. I could have been stuck in Africa. I'm glad my ancestors were enslaved. And we're like, we're watching, we're listening to this thing like, what are you talking about, bro? Like, I mean, fine, get it, fine. Maybe that might be a byproduct, but you can't thank somebody for making you guys slaves.
I mean, who even, like, he could have been living large in Africa. Could have been living a better life, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, that's
the conditioning that, right? Yeah. Hey, I'm living under white America, so I'm good. Mm-hmm. Right? And my life is always going to be better here in America than America. Right? Like that's the whole idea behind this whole conservative American exceptionalism type idea. Yeah. That life in America is a good life. Outside of America, it's a bad life. Yeah. You get what I'm saying?
So Brian, I am interested in understanding something about Hotep ideologically, because I know in the past I think you said something about like it doesn't matter what religion you are, you can be Hotep, because Hotep at the end of the day, like against Christianity and Islam or Judaism, could be Abrahamic faiths. You mentioned something about the roots are all within Hotep. Can you explain that a little bit? I think we can find some common ground there, but I just want to understand like Hotep theologically, and like, do you guys believe in afterlife and these kind of things?
Well, the religions are basically Abrahamic religions, which comes from the Nile Valley civilization, and you know the story of Heru and Set and so on and so forth. So all three of the religions come out of Africa, you know. So theologically, when people say, hey, I'm Muslim, I'm Jewish, I'm Christian, I'm like, all right, so y'all both study the work of Abraham. I mean, like, y'all the same shit to me. I don't really differentiate between the three religions. I'm more about action. Like, how do you live your life? Because you got some bad Muslims, you got some bad Christians, and you got some bad Jewish people. You got good Jewish people, good Muslims, and you got good Christians. You know, a lot of people might say, you know, they feel some type of way about Christians, but some of the nicest people I ever met was Christians. So I can't really talk bad about Christians. When it comes to things like the afterlife, I personally believe in reincarnation. I believe that is an ancient Kemet belief too. As you know, with the mummification, and they're worried about the afterlife and so on and so forth, and the reincarnation thereof. There's a metaphysical aspect of Hotep we don't talk about a lot. but there is a huge metaphysical aspect that can't be removed from being Hotep. I believe that there's a lot of metaphysical teachings that have been hidden in the Bible and not given its proper interpretation for people. There's a lot of so-called miracles that are performed in the Bible that I believe humans are capable of. I believe there is something called healing touch. They practice this in Asia, but there's a lot of different things that amazing things you can do as far as healing and so on and so forth. Just by understanding biology, by understanding magnetism, etc. I don't get involved in those things in the public forum. I study those in my private time because, like the Bible says, you can't throw pearls to swine. So when I'm dealing in the metaphysics of things, that's usually a private thing between me and my closest, usually me and the kids. We practice things like telepathy, and they're really good at it. But again, that's not something I talk about in the public sphere because people just ain't ready for that.
Yeah. Well, recently we had a problem among our Muslim community where we had a scholar who was teaching men about knitting, and I was kind of curious because I know a lot of I've at least what I've heard from black comedians like Chappelle or Eddie Murphy, they're like, I don't want to dress up as a woman, and I don't want emasculated black men in our community. And they were very like they had staunch stances on the emasculation of black men, and we're kind of experiencing that right now with our certain personalities within the Muslim sphere who have not necessarily, they don't talk about being emasculated, but the behaviors that they have in place aren't very masculine in nature. No one's talking about MMA. No one's talking about archery and hunting and activities that would be directly related to building character and a healthy form of manhood in our boys. So what kind of focus or how are you framing that message in your audience and in your communication, and whatever you personify within the Hotep movement?
If you got bitch assness around you, you might have some bitch assness in yourself. The fall of masculinity is because the rest of us ain't stepping up. And it's a lot of things we could do. There's a lot of time we could be spending with boys, but every Sunday we got to spend that watching MMA or NFL or whatever. A lot of those things that we might deem as good are still distractions within themselves and still have agendas within themselves. I just think that people need to spend more time on the real shit, and then that other stuff won't even have time or room to breathe. That stuff has room to breathe because people are putting time towards it. Just like he's putting time towards creating his knitting, you could be putting the archery shit together. You could be taking kids to the gun range, right? So I never complain about something that I'm not creating balance myself. So if I know that in the Hotep community, there's always poor righteous teachers, and I'm gonna make sure our first tenet is get out there and make sure we teach people about finance. If I know that the future is tech, I'm gonna go out here and be in tech. So that's the things I focus on. As far as masculinity is concerned, I wrote a book on it, right? So I'm not really interested in analyzing the problems as much as I am in figuring out how can I be part of the solution.
So I got a question. What's the Hotep stance on like the Moorish temple signs, like the Moors? Like, is there some relationship there, or what's your take on
Moorish Science Temple was created by Noble Drew Ali in 1913 under the Circle 7 Quran, and he still operates today in many different factions and subcommittees, etc. I think it's a beautiful organization, and I love the way that they read and study law.
Great, yeah, because I know, obviously being in Chicago, we get exposed to some of them because they think that I think Chicago is a holy land for them. So I bumped into a lot of them in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Elgin, Illinois is the Medina for them. So like Chicago's Mecca.
Really?
Yeah. There's a lot of them out here. Yeah, I met them before. But they're interesting people. Yeah, I mean, because and there's an interesting tie between the Kingdom of Morocco and the government of America before there was a government of America.
Right,
You got the Moroccan American Treaty because Morocco was the first African country to recognize America as a country.
Yep, the Barbary.
The Barbary pirates were the first. I think the initial treaties were made with the first few presidents or the first few governments in the United States.
I don't know, it's true, but I heard that even for Washington, the first president was a black man.
The what?
The first president America ever had was a black person.
Before
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I heard that before. I don't know how they reference it, but you know anything about that?
You talking about Hanson?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be curious to know if there's any reference because I've heard that before and I just never would able to. I just never looked it up.
Pre-colonialism? Is this
like
pre
George Washington? Like
pre-13 colonies?
A $2 bill got a black man in Congress.
Yeah, so I don't know exactly what period it was, but all I know is before Washington there was a black president. So this allegedly happened.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. Yeah, I haven't really looked into.
I mean, the thing is, that's part of the narrative that black people were only slaves, but they don't show us being as part of that aristocracy class. They just don't show that. But we were there. We were a part of the aristocrats in Europe too.
There were some, I believe, at some point there were some African slave owners that were before, like in the 1700s, like or 1600s, I think it was, or late 1600s. Yeah, early 1700s.
All throughout slavery.
Oh, really? I didn't all throughout. I thought at some point they got
slavery.
banned out after like the 1720s. They got banned.
What you got to do is you got to differentiate between types of slavery, though.
Like indentured servitude. You mean indentured servitude versus
however you want to delineate it.
Okay, all right.
I don't think it really matters, but there is a strong distinction because you had some people who were buying slaves because they were family members.
Right. Yeah, right. I read about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you had some that bought them because it was easier to get the work done, right? It was part of the economy back then. And Britain likes to take credit for going around the world and stopping slavery, but really they just did that because they couldn't compete. And slavery was a big part of culture in Africa, but it operated much differently in the African continent. You had freedom as a slave in Africa. If you said, hey, look, I feel like I can go out on my own and do this thing, they said, all right, cool. You were free to do that. You weren't held captive, so to speak. Did you have some places where people were POWs? Absolutely. But it was more like being a servant. When you look at third world nations today, or so-called third world nations today, you have people who work real cheap and are your servant. They come in, they wash the kids, they do your clothes, everything that a slave used to do on the in-house. You have that today in third world nations, Jamaica, Philippines, so on and so forth. And you're paying them peanuts compared to what you would pay somebody for that same job to do here in America. Is that slavery?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like the same thing we have in Islam, right? Where like the term and the ideas behind being a slave is very different than what we see in like the American.
The chattel slave. We've allowed the chattel slavery in America to become the
narrative of slavery, right?
Correct.
But like there are people that had like that if a slave wanted to be set free, that was his right to go and be set free, right? Or if he wanted a different master because the master was oppressive, that was his right to get that. Right. And like, so those kinds of things were not talked about, and like, for example, in our tradition, in Islam, you have to like feed them with the same food you eat, clothe them with the same clothes that you wear, put them in the same kind of housing that you have. Right. You can't have like a slave eating on a different table and you're eating on one table. Like they're part of your household.
Right. Like in Bangladesh, man, you're middle class. I go back to see my family and everyone's got a cook. They got the maid, the cook. They've got the driver. Right. Yeah. It's just the thing, and you bring from the village because the village is that they come to the main city, Dhaka, and then and it's not, you don't have to be rich to get one.
What's the alternative for those people though?
Yeah, just starve in the street, right? I mean,
exactly. So that's the same thing that when we talk about slavery, it's not always a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you see, right now we have slavery not by choice. Our labor is being stolen from us every single day. We talked about that earlier through the financial system. So today, you're a slave. You're a comfortable slave, but you're a slave still. Your labor is being stolen every day, every time they fucking inflate this currency or deflate the currency, because they like to retract the currency to cause boom and bust cycles as well. So they playing with our money, and when they playing with our money, they playing with our labor. So, a lot of people don't like me saying that, we slaves today, because they've got the propaganda from the abolitionists who didn't paint the exact picture of slavery. You had some slaves, they was free. They came up north and they was like singing songs like, man, I wish I was back down south on the plantation. They used to say, like, down south treated me better. They come up north and the north wasn't treating blacks better than the south. And then you had to actually like work and then pay bills, and then like there was a lot of responsibility. It was easy to stay on the plantation and chill. You work, and then when the sun went down, that was it, right? You got to chill, you got to dance, you got to hang out with fam. You have some slaves, they would defect for months and then come back, and the slave owner wouldn't even be mad. They just welcome them back. They should just take vacations whenever they wanted. It's a lot about slavery that's not being told, because everybody wants the victimhood.
Well, I think us pretty good now, in the sense that we're not going to accuse you of any kind of Islamophobia by any kind of opinion that you might hold that disagrees with Islam or Muslims in general. So I'm just going to go ahead and go out on a limb and just bring this up, because you put out an interesting tweet that made me raise an eyebrow, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to talk to Hotep about it, man to man, and we'll figure it out. And you said Arab and Africans, it is the Arab invasions and Islam perpetuation that weakened Africa. This opened the gate for the Europeans to invade. The Arabs enslaved Africans, raped the women, and castrated the men. They created slave armies to invade Africa. To this day, Sudan, Mauritania, Libya, Saudi, and others still practice slavery, but talking about that is Islamophobia. The Arabs would set up shop and religious outposts on the borders of the African territories. These entities acted as spies. And you go on as spies. So I don't take that as Islamophobic at all. I think that's an interesting point that you brought up, and I would like to discuss that with you, because I think when the Arabs invaded, they didn't invade Africa as they invaded other countries. Islam actually spread in Africa the most organic way, through the exchange of ideas rather than invasion. That's the first thing, and it's fully documented in history. It was the least amount of military or any kind of invasions that took, because in Africa they didn't have borders and all kinds of different giant empires that they were dealing with. It was a very organic exchange of ideas and culture and trade and commerce. That osmosis that was happening between those civilizations allowed Islam to enter into Africa. And I in that sense, I disagree with you in describing the Arab arrival into Africa as an invasion. The only Arab invasion or incursion that occurred was in North Africa, where it was Egypt, where the Arabs, it was, I think, Amr bin As, he attacked that side, and while Khalid bin Walid was on the eastern side.
So went up to Algeria, and that's how they started with the Berbers on that side. They went over to the Berbers, the Fatimids, the dynasty. But yeah, I mean, look, I think we have to distinguish two things. First of all, there are Arabs and there are Muslims.
I want to let him answer the question first.
Yeah.
Rather than you interject. Go ahead, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, but I just want to make sure between Muslims and Arabs. Right.
Yeah, so he actually made my point for me. There was an invasion. The invasion, like he said, was organically spread through the idea of Islam. and because of Twitter and the sake of brevity, I can't fit all of that in there. The slavery that happened was a caveat, but what happened was Africans became confused. You had Africans who looked like each other, and then you had Africans who looked like each other and practiced this Islamic religion. And what happened was the Africans who practiced the Islamic religion chose their Islamic brothers over their African brothers. And then miscegenation took place. And then that's how you have the incursion of the Afro-Arab. I believe in East Africa, what do they call it? Habesha?
Yeah, Abyssinia, Habesha, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you got the Habesha. So even today you got the Habesha, and it's almost like a mixed black person, that's really fair skin. In certain environments, they're going to play towards their whiteness because it's plays towards their advantage. In other environments, they're going to play towards their blackness because it plays towards their advantage. You had the same thing with the Afro-Arab, where when it's convenient, they pretend to be Arab, and when it's convenient, they pretend to be black. And you see that a lot with the Habeshas taking over with the left-wing ideology and socialist ideology, both in South Africa, America, and East Africa. And they bring that nonsense over there. So what we're talking about is an ideological invasion of Africa, which severed the nations. As you know, the Mali Empire was wholly an Islamic empire. So when I say invasion, I'm talking about a religious invasion.
Yeah,
confused a lot of people.
I'm glad you brought that up because, also I think Somalis tend to be in that category as well, too, along with the Habashis, because they tend to be mixed. They're actually considered to be an Arab, part of the Arab League, even though they don't speak.
So what do y'all go off of, the mom or the dad?
So we go after the father. You are what your father is.
Okay, so you go with the father is, right. So if my father is African,
you are African.
Then you are African, right? But if it's the other way, then you Arab. So what you'd have whole families split based upon that dynamic.
Right.
Say, oh, you're a dirty African. Oh yeah, we don't fucks with you.
So there are things of that element. But here's what's interesting though, you mentioned this, because my father's side comes from Yemen. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Aksum Empire. So the Aksum Empire took over parts of Yemen. Like I'm talking about from Aden all the way to Mekelle, which is like Hadramaut, which is where the region we're from, and even up to Sana'a. And that's where you first see the mixing of the Arabs and the Eastern.
Persia.
Huh?
You talking about Persia?
No, I'm talking about Yemen, which is like Aden. So across from Ethiopia is Aden, which is the port of Aden, and Sana'a in Yemen. It was the kingdom of Sheba, which was in Yemen. So if you look at Yemen, the map, right across Somalia and Ethiopia and Eritrea is Yemen, and it borders Saudi Arabia. But that was part of the Aksum Empire. And that for almost like, that was when, I want to say probably in the 500s or 400s, something like that AD, where the Aksum Empire took over, and they took over from the Himyarites that were over there. But you find the first mixing. That's why people from my region of Yemen, they tend to be mixed. Like they tend to be like, they look like they have a mixed background. Like they're not purely one way, right? But so I guess the Arabs and the Africans, especially East Africa, have been mixing for a very long time. Like even sometimes they were conquered or sometimes they were conquered. You know what I mean? I think that was part of this the age of empires that time, right? Because you had the Negus in Ethiopia that had a dominant kingdom. I mean, I'm talking about they would actually want to invade up into north, because at that time you had like the Byzantine Empire and you had the Persian Empire up north, all the way like, in the borderlands in what we call the Levant region now. So the Abyssinians actually attempted to even go all the way up that far through Mecca and that area. And that's kind of why I'm bringing up, because I'm like, I think this interaction, it is bound to happen, because there are certain cultural remnants of Ethiopia and stuff like that we see in Yemen today. I mean, even based on that cultural exchange.
When you talk about things like Mecca, a lot of people tell me that there's like inequality in Mecca, where, black people are forced to the outskirts of Mecca. So on and so forth.
Bro, everyone,
everyone
is enforced in the outskirts. Burmese, Indians, Pakistanis, Malaysians, everyone.
Yeah,
there is a certain.
Yeah, let me clarify.
I think we can say that there's some sort of hierarchy created within that world.
Yeah, but let me clarify one thing though. So a Saudi who's black, right? He will not view an African as the same as him. He will be the same color, the same hair, everything. But if you're
Isn't that what I was talking about before?
yeah. So the tribes are, because there are black Saudi tribes like Yosemite. There are black people like they're Ethiopian, they're Nigerians, like they even have these names, Najidi sometimes. But they will not view someone who's not born there. But again, this was a symptom of post-colonization, meaning after you had like the British Empire said, oh, you know what, you're Sudanese and you're Somali and you're Yemeni. Like even the Indo-Pacs and other Yemenis, like people myself, they will view them as lesser Arabs and say, oh, you're lesser than me. So unfortunately, yes, you're right. There's clear cases of racism, but it's not. It's funny. I want to be careful here. It's not based on the skin color. It's based on your country, the land you come from, your lineage, not your skin color. Because there are black Saudis, there are brown Saudis, there's white Saudis.
Are the black Saudis on that hierarchy as high as the white Saudis?
So let me tell you, Bandar bin Sultan is one of the kings. He's a black Saudi. He's a prince. He's a black Saudi.
Yeah, you see him. He looks black.
He's like an afro. He's Bandar.
Bandar.
They came in Bandar Bush, right?
Yeah,
because
he was a U.S. He
was the cahoots with the Bushes. Yeah.
He was in America. Yeah, but you're right though. In general, I would say, listen, if you're talking outside the royal family, there are very rich black families. Like for example, there's a guy named Muhammad al-Amudi who is Ethiopian. His mother's Ethiopian, his father's Yemeni, but lives in Saudi Arabia. But he's a black man, and he's one of the richest men in the world. And he lives in Saudi Arabia, lives in that area. But I think in general, culturally speaking, if you're, I think back when, maybe in the 50s and 60s, maybe when the countries first started coming out in the 1900s, there's some disparity. But now, to be honest, like Black American culture has got even in Saudi Arabia. So it's cool to be colored, pigmented. You know what I mean? Like
everybody picks up the culture. Nobody really cares about the individual, though. That's the
thing. That's the thing, right? Yeah.
White folks will pick up our culture, but they won't give a fuck when we're dead. Right?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. So you're right. There is tribalism that's there, and it's changing. But
again, with the racism among the Arabs, it's not just like let's just put aside what he said about the royal family, how they have people of different ethnicities and even black ethnicities. But when you see that this color problem, it's widespread within the Arab world and within largely most of the Muslim world, where we have the same problems as any other ethnicity. Whether it's even in China, they have the color problem where they're all fighting for the lightest shade of skin, and so on. So yes, racism exists based on in society. I think that's not anything new.
Like I know in Pakistan, India, like if you go over there, like they have Fair and Lovely creams where they're trying to make you lighter.
Oh, it's like bleach, dude.
Yeah, it's like bleaching your skin. Like like for me to go there and be like this way, and I know like I have people, they want to be lighter. I'm like, I'm cool with the way I am, man. Like, I don't want to change.
You're already pretty light though.
No. They want to be lighter than me. They want to be white. Like they want to be white. Like they want to be white people. You know what I mean? And I don't get that. I think it's a cultural thing over there, right? Like, I think it also comes from.
I think my problem with Islam is, and it's not even a problem. I just know that y'all look out for each other. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And everybody else comes second, right?
Well, you see, one of the things about Islam, Hotep, is that our messenger gave us this idea to unite around, that there's all these other characteristics, tribes, nations, skin colors, and languages, and all these characteristics about humanity that we can all rally around, right? We have in Chicago, we have the Chicago Cubs, and then we have the White Sox, and both fans hate each other. But an interesting thing happened when I went to a Cubs game a couple of years ago, was that when I went into the bleachers, I saw the left field bleachers screaming at the right field bleachers saying right field sucks, and then the right field bleachers screaming at the left bleachers saying they suck. And I thought that was the most fascinating thing, because they're both fans of the same team, and they're just hating on each other by making artificial a sense of an identity based on where they're located on the in the stands. So one of the things that Muslims understand, or they're supposed to understand, is that our unity is not based on, while we don't ignore it, it's not based on language, skin color, cultural norms, and other ethnic values or cultural institutions that are within society. Yes, those are great things that exist so that we can learn from each other about, but they don't form our community. And that's why our belief in worshiping a God and recognizing the Prophet Muhammad as the final messenger of God, as our rallying cry, as this is why we will have each other's back. And all these other characteristics of humanity are great and true and wonderful to learn from each other about, but they don't make us who we are. And that's why we as a community, we call ourselves an ummah, where we have each other's back. And that's how we have that kind of sense of like what's happening in Burma or the Uyghurs in China or whatever kind of oppression that Muslims might be experiencing around the world. We feel it, and we feel, even though we don't know them, we might not even know what their language they speak. We feel it because we have this common set of values or beliefs towards worshiping one God. And that's basically it. And I think that's what really delineates us from the Christians and the Jewish people, where we have this strong sense of watching for each other's back, even though our governments are acting against us.
Yeah, well, not only globally, but even in a micro level. Look in Chicago, like right where I used to live in the city. Like one of the, a lot of the mosques that was closest to me, mostly African American, a lot of converts, a lot of them are not really well off. We call it zakat eligible, right? So we'd always look out for them. We'd always be like, make sure they got food, right? We got white Muslims now. You're talking about Robert in Islam for Europeans, right? I'm not white, and he's got his own pain points, and I'm here to help him with that, right? So it's like, you're right, Brian. You're absolutely
are y'all Arab?
No, I'm South Asian.
Yeah, so
I'm from Bangladesh.
I'm a mix. I'm an Arab, but I have more of like a South Asian culture.
Percentage-wise, well, how Arab are you really? You claim like you're half Arab, or you're like 2%?
Well, no, my grandfather is from Yemen. So,
okay, because this dude plays the Arab card like all day, and I was like,
no, he definitely does. I knew him all my life. He has Yemeni family members. I know
Bengalis try to pretend sometimes to be speaking the Arabic, but yeah,
I don't know Arabic.
Yeah,
bro.
So
like straight up, like my ancestors worship cows.
Yeah, no, but so for me, but I would say even my South Asian culture, I identify a lot with it too, and I think it's great. But the thing is, like for me, I think that culture just comes, it really doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't really like. I think in Islam it makes its own culture. Right. So, I mean, there are people who are Arab, there are people who are South Asian, there are people who are African or Persian. Like they all have their own flavor. But I think when it comes down to the religion, all that kind of gets thrown out the way. They have maybe a certain dress. You'll notice it by the way they dress, by the way they look, maybe, or by the way that the language they speak. But when it comes down to the actual things like the core principles in the religion, you can't tell the difference between.
And the thing is, like, dude, I went to Morocco last year. It's like, you're welcome. You go there, you're like, Morocco, North Africa. They're like, oh, you're Muslim from America? Welcome. It's like people inviting me to their house for tea, all this stuff. I don't know them, but this connection is there, right? And I think that's the thing. But you're right. We do look out for Muslims. But the thing is, we have a low barrier to entry. It's like, oh, you got to, like, we want people to understand what the theology is. Don't like just convert just because, to get in some club. Like it should resonate with you. There's no faith. There's no compulsion in faith.
Yeah, I think some people, to be honest, though, after numbers, and I think for us, I think that's the wrong way to look at it, right? Yeah. Like I think a lot of people are overzealous and say, "Oh, just believe," right? They're in the numbers game, a competition. I think for us, at least for me, I don't care about the numbers, right? I mean, it's just if you believe, if it resonates with you, cool. We agree with the same belief, and that's it. Now you're one of my peoples, right? Like we get along with each other.
And one of the problems with, like, for example, color and ethnicity and language and the other characteristics that make up a group and rallying around behind that is there's different markers of it. There's people who aren't, completely black or brown, and they're, mixed ethnicities, and they don't necessarily fall into a certain or specific group. Those are, like, in my mind, they're just.
I think what my point is, you guys got a safety net. That's not a luxury black people have in America. There is no safety net. Right,
but we don't even have ideological safety net that they can rally around.
Follow me. You guys have a safety net. You can call on the Muslim community. 5 of y'all to share an apartment. Y'all pop up, open up a gas station. Next thing you know, a few years later, y'all rocking in the Benz. Y'all got that sense of community. Y'all also got a sense of language. So you can have private conversations in the public without people interfering too much, without too many FBI agents around you. You can identify your agents a lot faster and quicker, right? And the FBI has done a big job of hiring people who speak. But you guys have your own language to insulate you from the regular hoi polloi per se. Black people don't have that. You know, even our slang is demonized. It's thought of to be as less intellectual as the next language. But when you're Black in America and you want to come up, there is nobody to help you. If you go to the NAACP, they are not going to help you unless some white man has done some wrong to you directly. Whereas the Muslim community has done a great job of saying, hey, you're Muslim. Hey, this person's Muslim. We need to help them get on their feet. And you can go to them. That's something that Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X had built. You go to them, they get you on your feet, some place to stay, here, a job, transportation, you good. A couple of dollars in your pocket. Even Italians have set that up for some of their immigrants that came over. We don't have that as Black Americans, right? So in many ways, when we look at you guys, we're like, don't compare your struggle to ours because you guys are well off.
Of course.
Yeah, we're well
I
off.
agree.
But
We're well off, right?
I think that one of the most important things that Black people in the West,
they can
become Muslim.
The Islamic wealth in this world is tremendous.
Right.
I will say this though. So let's not like confuse something like the amount of money you see in the Gulf countries, none of that comes to us. Like they're very like, just like you said, governments and people who are power hungry, they don't want to share their money. Like in a sense of community, I think he's right in a way that when we come here, we got each other's back. Like if when
I drive down the street,
yeah,
right, I see the big building with the ice cream cone.
Yeah, the crescent, the dome.
The dome.
I see those. I see the ice cream cone.
Yeah.
I see the ice cream on top on the cone. I see that several places. Y'all come and y'all set up shop and y'all got wealth in your community.
Yeah.
No matter where you go, where you go on this planet, you can always go find an Islamic community, be a part of that, and be afforded some sort of wealth or some sort of assistance. United States of America, there's nothing like that exists for Black America.
Yeah.
That's the only thing we got is the bando and the crack house. That's where we go for sustenance.
Yeah, and that's why I and many others are inviting as many Black people to Islam as possible. That hey, you join our community. That's the
thing, and that's my problem with many religions. It's like, yeah, we'll help you if you convert. Like that's the same thing they did with the missionaries down in South America. They say, hey, you guys are having this problem. We're going to help you out, but before you do that, we're going to need you to praise the Lord Jesus Christ. It's not like, hey, we're going to help and you get to still be you and you get to keep your agency of religion or non-religion. It's like convert, be one of us, and it will help you, right? Which is not unsensible, right? But that's not the type of help I'm looking for. I'm looking for allies with empires who allow me to keep my empire and my culture. You keep yours, and we could work together.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think there's room for that.
Right? No, there is that.
There is that.
There is no condition that you need to be Muslim for us to help you.
Like for example, like there's this organization called Ohala Foundation.
Your culture. I'm around Islamic people all the time.
Yeah. I think your partner and your business is Muslim or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you're familiar.
I'm familiar with. What I'm telling you is from my experience, I don't know who's more racist, the white man, the Chinese man, or the Islamic Arab man. I can't tell who's more racist. Sometimes I want to say it's the Arab man.
Well, that I can't disagree with you on that.
No.
I've got those experiences too. You know,
we experience racism from within our own ethnicities.
I mean, no, but I think what Brian's saying though is that I know about the Arab Muslim man, especially the liquor store owner in the hood, is like the epitome of racism towards Black people. You see that in Chicago. Like I hear you on that one for sure.
I agree. Like
you ain't there's no disagreement there. That's for sure. So that's
so when I operate in this world I just see enemies all around me, and then I just try to find the good folk within. It's just a bunch of gangs running around trying to do their thing, trying to hold power, right? And the thing about a gang is you got to jump people in to make your own gang, right? So you get Islamic people and they want you to convert. That's the equivalent of jumping me into your gang so I could rock with your gang, and then now we could build together. But I'm just not interested in joining any of these Abrahamic religions.
No, we growing up, me and Mord, we had a lot of non-Muslims who would hang out in our majority Muslim groups. No one was, they
weren't invited to everything.
Yeah, but no, they wouldn't come to our religious things, right? But they would.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They weren't invited to everything.
I wouldn't stop them. I mean, they just probably were bored. They didn't come in.
Somebody would have stopped them.
No, I'm telling you.
The only place they're barred from entering is Mecca in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that's it.
But otherwise,
there's an unsaid barrier created between all cultures and others.
So I think there's certain,
even in Hotep Nation, there's certain barriers between the C-level executives and the rest of the Hoteps. For the sake of infiltration and secrets and whatnot.
Right. No, what I'm saying, we're not going to sit and, they're not going to sit and make him part of the community, obviously not. But if he wanted to go to the mosque and pray and just sit down, or just watch it, we're not going to say nothing to him. But obviously, they're not going to treat him like a brother. He's not he's not, he's not a faith. That's different. But I think what we're saying though at the same time though is that like that community building though, we could build with people who are non-Muslims. Like if we have shared values. Like,
here's my thing. Like everybody wants to paint like this Muslim community, like it's so good and great, and I don't see it.
Yeah, and
I see a few. Like I got y'all, I got my homie Shahan, I got my boy Maher. I got a few of them that are cool, but the greater majority, it's like y'all trying to, paint an image that doesn't exist.
So I will say this much: a lot of Muslims in America and the West and the world in general are failing towards doing that. I agree. I just like you said, the racism that's out there, we'll call it out and say, "Hey, it's wrong," right? It exists. I'm not going to deny that it exists and it happens there. But there's a movement of
Brian. No, what's really happening around the world is selfishness is breeding itself. Everyone's looking out for numero uno, and everyone else second. It's not necessarily I'm going to be looking out for Brian or any other race out there.
No, not expecting that. What I'm saying is I like transparency.
I know.
In the hood, if you come up on a blood, he gonna let you know, like, hey, I don't fuck with you because you such and such. Yeah. If you run across anybody in the hood, they're gonna say, yo, keep your distance. I don't fuck with you. You just not one of us, right? Keep your distance, right? You're guarded. What I find is people operate guarded, but like to come out in the public and talk like they're not guarded. I need that level of transparency and say, look, this Islam thing we got, this for us. This ain't for you. It could be for you, but we looking out for us. That for me, that builds trust. When I hear people say, oh, we're not like that and all this stuff, I'm just like, all right, just keep lying to me. I just,
I see what he's saying. So no, so look, I think we're trying to say, is there a clear difference between how you treat a fellow Muslim and non-Muslim? Like meaning the advantage.
Yeah. Of course, that's what I like to hear.
We have a concept in Islam. It's called al-wala wal-bara, meaning we love what Allah loves and we hate what Allah hates.
Yeah.
If there's disbelief and we're not going to vibe with that. We're going to say, be totally cool with it and be like, hey, that's fine. No, but then obviously, sure, we have concept like helping your neighbor and doing this and that. Of course, it's a nice charitable thing for a community. But as a bond of brotherhood, that brotherhood can only be if we share that belief. And that's true brotherhood for me. And that's just how it is. If you're looking for that kind of, the answer, like meaning how you understand it, that's how it is. Like, if you're a Muslim, then you're my brother or you're my sister. If not, then, I respect you as a brother in humanity, but that's about as far as we're going to go.
Yeah. And I want to be frank, we don't expect you to convert unless you understand the tenets of faith.
Yeah, I wouldn't want somebody to.
And you believe, we don't want someone coming in and
don't want no fake shit.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right. I hear what you're saying. I think we're agree, and I think your experience is valid because I've seen that even when you have people, because Muslims are still flawed human beings.
Yeah,
and so
I'm a reader of human behavior.
Yeah,
my book right now is inside of the curriculum at a university of a professor of psychology is using it right now. Curriculum for a psychology course at a university. Right? I understand psychology, so when I interact with somebody and how they speak to me and how they address me lets me know what they think of me. And when I run into people of your persuasion, I get, look at this little nigga. Just like when I run into a white liberal, it's like this, oh, you can't do good. You're low. And I don't care. I just know it exists. And I have to operate like that, right? And I have to adjust like that. And I can use that to my advantage or my disadvantage, right?
Yeah.
I'm a realist. I deal with things in the actual. I don't deal in things in the idealistic.
Yeah, I think you're right for a lot of parts. And I'll tell you why. Because there's an immigrant community that came into America, and a lot of them have this old world mentality, like this colonial mentality, right? I think that, and so what you're experiencing, I don't doubt it. I've seen racism myself.
How many of them will let their daughters date Tyrone from the block?
They won't. No, but you know what? And I'll be honest.
My cousin married a black man.
Wait 1 second. No, but that's like saying, I know a black friend.
No,
it doesn't work that way. Yeah.
No.
But what I'm saying though is like this. I'll be honest with you. If it's I think with marriage and you might understand this too as well. I think when it comes to marriage, it's more than just love, right? It's about culture. It's about vibing. It's about economic prosperity. It's about a lot of different things, right? When you have a daughter, you're not just gonna let them get married because she loves somebody, right? It's more than that. Now, if you're stopping somebody based on skin tone alone, yeah, that's messed up, right? But there are people out there who do that. I know of South Asians, I know of Arabs, I know a lot of people, even Chinese.
Look, did you ever see an Arab groveling at white people? They grovel like crazy. Like they change their name, white. They change their region, the region of the world they're from. They'll change it to something that sounds more European.
We are the Paris of Arabia. Like
instead of Syrian, they'll say Assyrian or something. They think that sounds more palatable. No, there are some Syrians who say that too, though.
Yeah. Funny. No, but what I'm saying is, I think he's right about that. Like there is the low down racism where would you let your daughter marry a black man, or would you let your son marry a black woman? And I think there's some immigrant people out there that have a problem with that. They have a genuine problem with that. But just like I feel like they wouldn't let them marry a Pakistani or Indian, or they wouldn't let them marry a Chinese or an Asian, right? They want them to marry an Arab. It's not just the black person. You know what I'm saying? Like, imagine, I mean, Sim was talking about, and I think other people, there are Arabs who will, like, simply because you're even the same religion, you may even speak Arabic with them, but you are not an Arab even from the same tribe, and they won't let you get married to them. Even though the girl's head over heels, like she wants to get married, it won't happen because the father says, nah, we just don't, we're different. We're just different, right? And it shouldn't be that way, but I think that is changing among our generation. Because what's happening is like, we grow up, we talk to, I mean, I'll be honest, like most people in our parents' generation, they didn't talk to somebody that was from a different race and a different culture or a different language. They didn't talk. I mean, the first time they saw that was in America. Yeah. When they came here, like
some of our grandfathers who immigrated here never even learned to speak English.
Yeah, but I'll be honest. Like my uncle that first came in America, he was in the '60s. He was walking around Malcolm X up in New York. He was on Broadway plays. Like he was diverse in that way, right? Right. So my family is a little bit unique in the sense they've got to have that experience where they were like, married out in different culture. But I've seen some other parts of my mom's family that come that side that's very recently to America, and they, God forbid, you have a different person from a different identity in their family. It's all hell raising loose. I mean, they can't understand that.
Yeah, Brian. At the end of the day, I think what we're trying to say is that like we have an ideal with our Islamic religion, right? And sometimes people don't live up to it, and that paints the because your interactions. You're right. You're reading into people who are not living up to that. And they're feeding you, and you're feeling the BS because you're like, well, that's not my experience. I can see through, you know what I'm saying? But we still have an ideal around it, right? That we try to live up to, or we should recognize. Yeah. Many of our people don't recognize it, right? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And
the last speech, the last sermon of the prophet, where it talks about an Arab man is not better than a black man, or nor a white man is better than an Arab man. Yeah. All that stuff was in the last sermon of the prophet, and people just, I mean, that's the marker that the prophet left for the people. Now, whether or not we exemplify those words, that's another question. But the ideal is set. The marker of what is righteous, that only people who are who do good work are better than the other one. Only the people who are best in their actions, their rank is higher than the other, and that's the only thing that's the metric that was outlined by the Prophet Muhammad. Whether or not people in their own ways, crazy ways, whether they all follow that or not, that's, of course, I do not doubt your experience.
I just feel bad that his experience happened to be with people that are like crappy like that.
Yeah, well, could someone push back saying that, like, you know, we're talking about tribalism that exists within us, but that also exists within the Black community as well. I mean,
yeah,
you know, I don't know, but you know, at the end of the day, I hear where you're coming from. You want to like, yeah. I want to respect your time. I think you want to wrap. What are you working on these days? Where can people find out more about you? Like, where can we like read your books and, you know, any final word for our audience? Really appreciate it today, man.
Yeah, briansharp.co. That's my home base. Got all my projects I'm working on, all the books I write. Got a new book on the way on the history of United States and monetary policy. So it's gonna be fun, man. We got some good stuff coming soon.
All right, man. Thank you so much for your time. We'll see y'all next time.
Awesome.